She whispered, "I miss you," into a phone that never answered. Then time happened. People changed. Until one day, her 2 a.m. text finally got through. It was 2 a.m. when Emily whispered into her phone. Her room was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the window. The glow from the screen painted her face in soft blue light. She stared at the text she had typed for too long. Just 3 words. "I miss you." Her thumb hovered above the send button as if pressing it might pull him back. But silence had been their only language for months, and silence was louder than anything he had ever said. Emily hit send anyway. A single buzz, then nothing. No dots, no reply, no sign of life on the other side of the screen. She lay back on her bed, the phone still glowing beside her. Outside, a car passed by, spraying puddles across the street. It sounded like the world moving on without her. That night, silence became her answer, and she told herself it was over. But what if silence isn't the end, but a beginning? The next morning, sunlight slipped through half-open blinds. The coffee tasted bitter. Her phone stayed still. Emily opened her laptop, drowning herself in work she didn't care about, anything to quiet the echo of what she'd said, anything to forget his name. His name was Daniel. He loved late-night jazz and believed pancakes fixed everything. He also believed he was never enough for her. They had met in a record store downtown. He asked her opinion about a Miles Davis album he'd already bought. She laughed, called him ridiculous, and that was how it began. For 2 years they were inseparable, lazy Sundays, long drives, burnt toast in her kitchen. But one night, words that should have healed only cut deeper. He wanted space. She wanted certainty. So they both walked away pretending the other didn't matter. Back then, pride was louder than love, and pride can build walls that love can't climb. Have you ever stayed silent just to protect your heart? Weeks turned into months. Emily learned to live with quiet mornings and long nights. Her phone became just another object on her nightstand. But one evening, while cleaning out old photos, she found the thread again, their last conversation, the one that ended with no goodbye. She scrolled through their memories like flipping through ghosts, shared playlists, inside jokes, that half-written text from him that only said typing, and then nothing. Her eyes stung as she scrolled higher, until she saw her own message again, the one sent at 2 a.m., still there, unread, frozen in time. She tapped it once, then closed her eyes, and for a moment, she could almost hear his laugh. Sometimes memories don't fade. They wait, like unopened messages still trying to deliver. What if a message could wait longer than love? Rain fell again that night, like a habit the sky refused to break. Emily stood by the window holding her phone, watching streetlights shimmer in puddles. She thought of deleting his contact for good. But she didn't. She couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she scrolled up and read everything again. Every word, every pause, every goodbye they never said. Then she locked the screen and let the silence swallow her again. Time moved on, but the phone remembered. It always does. And somewhere between moving forward and holding on, she got lost. The next day, she passed by the same record shop. It had closed down, windows covered with brown paper. She stopped and smiled faintly at the memory. Inside her chest, something loosened, not forgiveness, not regret, just space. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the absence of ache. She walked away, leaving the past behind, or so she thought, because what waits quietly often waits for a reason, and some things find their way back when you least expect it. 5 years passed, seasons changed, apartments changed. Even the city lights felt different, but 2 a.m. still felt the same. Emily worked at a small cafe near the pier. Mornings smelled of coffee and sea salt. She had learned to smile again, even if her eyes still carried pieces of the past. The phone she once couldn't put down now stayed face down on the counter. Life was quieter, simpler, softer, but sometimes, in the silence between customers, her mind still wandered back. She would glance at her phone, half expecting a name that never came, and when it didn't, she reminded herself that peace meant no longer waiting. Have you ever confused peace with numbness? One night, after closing the cafe, she walked home through the fog. The city hummed low, and the moon was hiding behind the clouds. She unlocked her door, dropped her keys, and checked her phone. No new messages, no missed calls, just the same stillness that had become her routine. Emily showered, made tea, and sat by the window with a book she wouldn't finish. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away. The clock glowed 2 o'clock a.m. again. She sighed, set the book down, and closed her eyes. When she opened them, the phone buzzed. A single vibration. One message. She froze. Her heart skipped once, then twice. The sender's name blinked on the screen. Daniel. Her breath caught. For a second, she thought it was a glitch, a cruel trick of time, but the message was there, glowing, waiting. Is this still you? Emily stared at the words, her pulse echoing in her ears. 5 years of silence collapsing into one notification. 5 years of wondering suddenly crashing into now. She didn't type. She couldn't. Her fingers trembled like she was holding something fragile. Then another buzz. I read your message, just not when you sent it. Her throat tightened. She wanted to ask how, where, why, but all she could do was stare at the tiny screen as the rain started again. The night stretched thin, like time itself was holding its breath. Emily placed the phone on her chest, afraid it might vanish if she blinked. The city outside felt distant, unreal. She finally typed back, yes, it's me. Seconds passed, then minutes, no reply. Her chest sank as the hope she hadn't asked for began to fade again. But at 2:13, the phone buzzed once more. I didn't mean to disappear. She whispered into the dark. Then why did you? Her words didn't leave her lips, only her thoughts. The next day, she went to work pretending nothing had changed, but everything had. Her hands shook when she poured coffee. Her heart raced every time her phone lit up. After the shift, she walked along the pier again. The sea cold and endless. Waves crashed against the wood, steady as breathing. She opened her messages and scrolled to his name. There it was. The conversation frozen in time, now alive again, like a wound reopening and somehow healing at the same time. She typed slowly, why now? For a while, there was nothing. Then the 3 dots appeared. They pulsed once, twice, and stopped. Then started again. Because I finally can. That night, they talked. Not about the past, not about pain, just small things, music, work, the weather. And then, silence again, but a different kind. It wasn't empty anymore. It was calm, familiar, almost safe. Emily smiled at her screen. Her chest felt lighter, not because she got closure, but because she didn't need to force one. Sometimes, letting a story breathe is enough. Still, she couldn't help but wonder, what happened all those years? Why did that message take so long to arrive? What if the universe really had held it back until now? The next morning, she found herself staring at the sunrise. The light painted gold over the waves, over her reflection. Her phone buzzed again. One final text from Daniel. Can we talk? There's something I need to tell you. Her fingers hovered above the screen again, just like 5 years ago. Except this time, she pressed open without hesitation. Whatever waited, she was ready to face it. Because maybe this wasn't about getting someone back. Maybe it was about finally understanding why she sent that message in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, some messages don't need to arrive on time. They just need to arrive when we're ready. Emily met Daniel at a small diner near the edge of the city. 5 years, one message, a lifetime in between. She almost turned back twice before stepping inside. He was already there, sitting by the window. The light caught his face, older now, quieter. When he smiled, it wasn't the same smile she remembered, but it was real. They stood for a moment, unsure whether to hug or just say hi. He broke the silence first. You look good. Em, she nodded. You too. It's been a while. The waitress brought coffee neither of them would drink. They sat across from each other, hands wrapped around empty mugs, like holding on to something that had already slipped away. Outside, cars moved slowly past, but inside, time didn't move at all. Finally, Daniel looked up. I owe you an explanation. He told her about that night, the same night she had sent the message. He had been driving home, too fast, too angry. They had fought earlier that day, words thrown like knives. He didn't see the other car until it was too late. The impact was sharp, then silence. His phone was in the passenger seat, screen cracked but still glowing. When the paramedics found him, he was unconscious. The phone had one unread notification, her 2 a.m. message. He paused, his eyes drifting toward the window as if seeing it again. When I woke up in the hospital, that message was still there. Those 3 words, I miss you. Emily's breath caught, her eyes filled, not from guilt but from something deeper, the strange grace of knowing she had unknowingly reached him when no one else could. Daniel continued softly. For a long time, I thought it was just coincidence, but when I was lying there, hooked to machines, that text was the only thing that reminded me I wasn't alone. Silence settled again. Outside, the rain started, faint, familiar, almost comforting. Emily traced the rim of her cup. She whispered, I didn't know. He nodded. I know. You weren't supposed to. He took a breath. I saw your message years later because my phone was destroyed. I got a replacement. And when I restored my data last month, it appeared again. That's when I realized I never replied. He looked down, his voice almost breaking. I didn't want to reach out until I had something real to say. Emily blinked back tears. You could have said anything. He smiled faintly. Yeah, but I didn't want to say sorry. I wanted to say thank you. For the first time in years, the quiet between them felt safe. No blame, no explanations left to chase. Just 2 people sitting across from each other, finally unburdened by time. Emily asked softly, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't sent that text? He met her eyes, every day. A pause, then he added, but maybe it's not about what would have happened. Maybe it's about what did. She smiled, that same soft smile he remembered from years ago, the one that said she'd forgiven both of them without needing to say the word. As they left the diner, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, new. They walked toward the crosswalk where the streetlights flickered amber. He turned to her. You know, sometimes I think that message wasn't late. It just arrived when I was ready to hear it. She nodded. Maybe messages, like people, find their timing too. They stood there, the world around them quiet. Cars passed. The signal changed. Neither of them moved. Later that night, Emily sat by her window again. The same window. The same hour. Only now, the silence didn't feel empty. She scrolled through their conversation one last time. Her final message read, take care of yourself. His reply blinked beneath it. Always do now. She smiled, locked her phone, and set it beside her, outside. The streetlight flickered once, like a pulse. Sometimes, closure isn't a door closing, it's a light staying on. Sometimes, a message sent in the dark becomes the thing that keeps someone alive. The camera pans out, her window glowing softly against the quiet street. The phone screen still lit, one unread message left unanswered. Thank you for saving me that night. The light fades, the city hums low, and the final line lingers like a heartbeat. Because not every story is about falling in love. Some are just about finding the right moment to say something true, somewhere between letting go and holding on. There's that quiet moment when the heart pivots. Not loud, not dramatic, just a breath, and everything feels a little different. Maybe this story reminded you of someone. Maybe it found you at the right time. Take that feeling with you and let it change something small today. If you felt that shift, stay close. Subscribe to Pivot Stories and turn on the bell so you won't miss what comes next. Share this story with someone who might need it today, and tell us what it made you feel down in the comments. Because sometimes the smallest story becomes the one that changes everything.